This podcast series is supported by members at Patreon. If you want to support this podcast series, head to patreon.com/Cascadian Beer. When you follow your dreams and aim for the top, sometimes you can achieve the impossible. Welcome to the Cascadian Beer Podcast. My name's Aaron, and I'm a Cascadian. I have a background in radio and television broadcasting. I'm a music producer, and I have a passion for beer. I don't consider myself an expert in beer by any means, but I do enjoy and respect the craft and the passion of these brewmasters. I want to learn from these pioneers on what sets them apart from the rest, and why they choose to call Cascadia their home. Cascadia is a bioregion in the Pacific Northwest on the North American continent. It is comprised of the U.S. states of Washington and Oregon, as well as the Canadian province of British Columbia. In this podcast series, I'll be profiling the unique breweries of Cascadia, a region that has a strong presence on the international beer scene. Today I'm in Seattle, Washington. Almost in the shadow of the Ballard Bridge is a brewery with an excellent view. RoofTop Brewing Company started in the garage in 2012, but always had dreams of becoming a place where you can enjoy a pint on a rooftop.
My name is Craig Christian. I am the founding member of RoofTop Brewing Company, and I am the head of operations.
And we are on a rooftop. So that's kind of where the name comes from, right?
The rooftop story is a good one. Parker Whitman, who's one of my business partners, and I were brewing a batch of beer in my driveway. I had been telling him for a lot of years that I was going to rip the roof off my house and put a deck on it because the view would be outstanding. And he always said, no, that's never going to happen. But sure enough, I did it. And several years later, while we were brewing a batch of beer in my driveway, I said, I'd really like to try opening a small brewery. And he said, well, if you do it, you have to call it Rooftop, because the idea of Rooftop is doing something that you really want to do, follow your dreams, and sometimes you can achieve the impossible.
So did you hunt out this site specifically? Because it's interesting because there's the main road that goes past here to the front, but then there's a gigantic warehouse downstairs. So is this still technically a rooftop?
Oh, absolutely. Our deck is it was all a rooftop before we put the deck on it. We found this location. It was actually one of the first locations we found when we were looking for a place to expand into a 15-barrel brewery. But it's a little bit in no man's land for retail. There are no other restaurants nearby, and there's not a lot of shops or anything like that. So we looked around quite a bit, but clearly this building just fit our idea so well, because you can walk right out from our driveway, from our parking lot onto the rooftop. And we do have a huge warehouse downstairs that we can expand into as we grow.
When did this place open then?
We've been here for 2 years. Rooftop started just over 4 years ago as a one-barrel brewery, and at that point, the rooftop was aspirational. We were in a garage brewing one barrel of beer at a time and opening our doors 3 days a week. And there was no distribution at that point. So it was all kind of word of mouth, and we sold out of beer every week. So.
Oh, right. And that was just growler fills, or were you bottling anything?
We were not bottling anything at the time, but we did open for pint sales and growler fills.
And so what is the capacity of the tasting room now?
We have a capacity for 50 people outside and 25 inside. Although our outside space can be covered, the roof opens and closes, is heated, and it's comfortable out there in the wintertime. So
you said we're not in a really retail heavy area. Who are your customers then? Because is it residential nearby, or do people have to venture out here to come taste your beer?
It's a combination. There's a lot of manufacturing down along the canal. So we do have a lot of people who work nearby who come by after work for a pint. We're right at the base of the north side of Queen Anne Hill, which is all residential. So from here south is all residential. And we're also in a corridor that's very heavy with traffic. So people pop in here. They have to drive here to go across the Ballard Bridge or go to South Lake Union along Westlake. So it's a great great little spot for people to pop in when they want to get out of traffic and have a pint.
So those 2 years in the garage, was that intentional? Like, were you looking for a place like this from day one when you wanted to start this brewery, and it was just kind of to get you off the ground and get you going?
No, it was definitely cutting our teeth in terms of production brewing, figuring out whether it was something that we really wanted to get into in terms of a career in growing a small business and putting a lot of resources in. So we started off with the bare essentials, putting as few resources in terms of money into it. It was all sweat equity, lots and lots of hours of brewing and fixing up a little garage in order to just find out if this is truly something that we believe we can succeed with. It was very clear from the very inception that this is something that both my business partners and I really wanted to do, and it became something that we feel it was very successful from the get-go.
Now, you gave me a little tour beforehand, and you pointed out your pilot system. That's the same system that you started with, right?
That's correct, the one barrel system.
And what special things do you do on there?
We use that to test batch for new recipes, things we want to try, just one-off crazy beers that maybe one of us has a wild hair and wants to give a shot. So sometimes it's things that we want to scale up to a 15-barrel batch, and sometimes it's just for fun.
So what style are you known for? Are you mostly focusing on pale ales, IPAs, lagers? Like what styles of beer do you focus on brewing here?
We try to brew across the spectrum in terms of giving folks their hoppy options, their IPAs, their double IPAs. We even have a triple IPA in production right now. I think we're known for palatable beers. So things that people are going to enjoy drinking, that we're not doing sour beers. We're not, we might do a sour beer here and there, but there are a lot of breweries around Seattle that are known for that. We tend to brew things. I think if you have a rooftop beer, it's a beer that, is going to be high quality and very palatable.
You said maybe do a sour beer, and there are a lot of breweries in Seattle. What challenge does that present to you guys in terms of the amount of competition in the Seattle area?
I would say that most breweries don't view other small breweries as competition. There's a market for us all right now. I think that if you want to be a small brewery and you're okay with being a small brewery and keeping things extremely local, I think that there's a lot of room in the market. If you want to be another Deschutes or something like that, I think that there will be a place that there's going to be a sweet spot for brewery size. And I don't think we've hit that yet. We have a 15-barrel system. We're producing about 1,500 barrels a year. And I feel like we're still very small compared to what we could be. But I also recognize that not everybody can be huge.
And so is the majority of your sales in the tasting room, or do you have accounts elsewhere at like restaurants that you're on tap?
It varies a little bit seasonally. Obviously, with a rooftop deck, we do the majority of our tasting room sales in the summertime. And I would say we hit about, at this point, 50% sales in the tap room in the summer. And it's scaled back to maybe 35% in the winter. But our wholesale, we've been very steadily but slowly growing that part of the business. It is the easier part of the business to grow. There's a lot of bars and restaurants in the Seattle area, and we've just scratched the surface with that. So I would assume if you came back and asked me in another year, it would be closer to 25% sales in our tap room. Although I feel like the tasting room is something that we definitely focus on. Our goal is to have the best tasting room in Seattle. We already have a great rooftop deck.
It's beautiful.
And we're planning on expanding that this winter to basically double the size of the deck so that we can have a stage and we can have games like cornhole and things like that, more yard games, more of a backyard home deck barbecue feel.
Yeah, a friend with a really nice backyard.
Yeah. Exactly.
Who also brews beer.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. So what was the beer that inspired you to go down this path then? Is there one particular beer that really stands out for you?
There is. So I live across the street from a coffee shop that originally it was a roaster. It's called Seven Roasters. And I started brewing a coffee porter from using the beans from that roastery. And the owner at the time, it's since transferred ownership, but he always said, if you make this beer so that I can sell it, I'll sell it. And so maybe that was a seed. Maybe it was just affirmation that this is something that I can do. But after quite a few years of him telling me that, that was the beer that we started with.
So is it just a happy coincidence then that the two neighbors in this building are coffee roasters, or was that intentional as well to find that?
Total coincidence. But I think that one of the things I've found is that the craft coffee in Seattle, that scene is very similar to the craft beer scene in that everybody collaborates, everybody's friends, everybody knows each other. It's not a competition type thing. It's more of a, let's make the best craft beverage that we can make and be happy when other people are making great craft beverages because we can enjoy them.
You've done some collaborations with them before, haven't you?
Yeah, we've done collaborations. Both Zoka Coffee Roasters and Cafe Ladro Roasting are in the building with us, and we've done collaborations with both of them. And we have one that I'm particularly proud of. It's our Ladro sul Tetto. Cafe Ladro means coffee thief. So Ladro means thief, and sul Tetto means on the roof. So it's the thief on the roof. It's a very high-end, single origin, light roast coffee, something that you don't normally see put into a beer. And the beer is all about the flavors that come from the coffee. So we built the beer just to highlight that. And it's every time we brew it, we use a slightly different coffee, but it's all single origin, light roast. And it's a very unique beer that it tastes a little bit like you're drinking cold brewed coffee.
And it's so fresh because the roaster is literally across the warehouse from you. So yeah,
they require us to wait 24 hours before we make the coffee to put in the beer, but that's how fresh it is when it goes in the beer.
Now I'm looking at some of your names on the wall there. How do you come up with some of these names, and is there a story behind them?
There's a story behind most beers that have a name, whether it be, I won't say random, but it's definitely inspired by the beer. And the story that I think that people have heard quite a few times now, if they come in here, is the tank ride story. So the tank rides are Russian Imperial Stout. And that was named for unbelievable thing that happened to me about 20 years ago. I was in the Peace Corps in Russia. So I was in the Peace Corps teaching environmental education in secondary schools in a really small town in the Russia Far East. So if you don't know where Vladivostok is,
I do. Yeah.
It's right on the Sea of Japan. It's the only open water port in Russia. And I was about 180 miles north of there in a small town of about 40,000 people. And one of I taught school there, but I also coached the local basketball team. And that connection brought me in contact with a lot of dignitaries, local dignitaries. And one guy that I worked out in the gym in the same spot where I was the general. I never knew his actual name. Everybody just called him the general. So the general asked me quite a few times to come over to his house and be social and that type of thing. And it didn't work out. And finally, in the dead of winter, my second year in the town, he said, "You're coming over to my house. We're going to do the banya." Banya is like a sauna. It's really in a town where there was infrequent hot water, infrequent electricity, sometimes no heat, and it could reach 40 below zero. The banya was a necessity that all Russians used. So of course I said yes. And the day came, I got in a cab, went out to his house. It was about 20 below zero. He lived a little bit outside of town, and most Russians lived in apartments that were the Soviet era concrete block that you've probably seen video or pictures of. But no, the general lived in a McMansion, something I had not seen at all in my time in Russia, a giant house. And I went up to the door and knocked, and his wife told me to follow the path around the back. The path was through the snow. And so I walked about half a mile, maybe a little bit less than that, into the woods. And there was the banya. And of course, there were 8 Russians there, including the general, all career military. If you've ever been in a Russian banya, of course, you're naked, you're beating each other with oak branches, and there's a ton of vodka. And the other thing is there's a stream nearby where they had chipped out the ice. So you sweat, you jump in the stream. So you can imagine this experience a little bit. But 8 guys, and immediately they just start grilling me. They're beating me with oak branches. We're doing shots of vodka, and they're grilling me over why I was never in the military. You know, have I ever jumped out of an airplane? Have I ever shot a gun? Have I ever ridden in a tank? Had I, all of these things. And basically, they couldn't believe that I hadn't done any of these things. and they were questioning my manhood, quite frankly. But eventually the time came when the vodka ran out. And so half-liter vodka per person is pretty much the gold standard in that part of Russia. We finished our vodka, and at that point we were talking about tanks and how I had never been inside a tank or never ridden in a tank or anything like that. And the general said, "Come on, we're going to get more vodka. Put your clothes on, let's go." And so we start, everybody gets their clothes on, walks outside, and he says, no, not that way back to the house. Come this way with me. And we walk through the woods a little ways, and sure enough, in a little clearing, there's a tank. It's a 2-man tank, and there's 9 of us. So there's some struggles there, but everybody climbed in. The general said, "Craig, you're driving." So this is one of these things where there's all sorts of like levers and gears and things like that. And I just basically started moving things around. Things are spinning. People are ducking. I may have crushed a tree or two. And finally, the general laughed enough where he said, "Okay, move over. I'm driving." We pop up onto the road in the tank, start driving towards town. If you can imagine that, something out of maybe a bad sitcom or something that you wouldn't believe, but this is, you can't make this stuff up. We're driving into town, 9 guys in a 2-seater tank, come up upon a kiosk where they sell vodka, because they sell vodka in every kiosk in Russia. The general pops out, buys 4 or 5 more bottles of vodka. And just as he's hopping back into the tank, these 2 cop cars come screaming up. And the cops come out of their cars, guns drawn, rifles drawn, and say, "Get out of the tank." And of course, the general looks at me and he kind of gives a smirk. And I'm like, okay, I'm worried that this is going to be an international incident, that I'm going to be arrested. But the general just pops his head out of the tank and in his loudest voice says, "What?" And I just watched the 2 cops' face turn white as they said, "Sorry, General, sorry." Got back in their cars and drove away. And we took the tank back to his banya and drank some more vodka.
Right.
That's the tank ride story.
So you wanted to make a Russian Imperial Stout, and so that just naturally fell into place, right?
Yeah, actually, I didn't connect the two. We made a Russian Imperial Stout, and it was my business partner, Parker, who said, "Well, you got to call it the tank ride." And of course, that just seemed obvious to me after that. And now we've bottled it once. That batch is gone. But we do have our tank ride shirts with the general in the tank. And we will definitely bottle that beer again. It's a standard here. So
who's inspiring you locally for the beers that you make? Like, is there somebody locally that you go to regularly to check out and go, "You know what, we should be doing this"? Or maybe if I tweaked my recipe a little bit, we'd bring that out.
I think there's always a desire to do things better and make yourself better. So we have a head brewer. His name's Kyle, and he brings to the table a totally different set. He brewed in Ohio and concentrated on more English style ales, whereas my tendency is maybe more towards a bigger beer, a higher ABV beer, something with a little more punch. And so I think together we've really been able to create beers that are across the spectrum in terms of from light to dark and low ABV to high ABV, all things that people will consider palatable, easy to drink, and still flavorful.
And if somebody was wanting to go down a path of starting their own little brewery, what would be some advice that you'd give them?
Work in a brewery before you open a brewery. I worked in a brewery in my early 20s, brewing beer and front of house sales as well. And that experience was invaluable. I would say get to know the business before you jump in. I know that there are a lot of homebrew clubs and businesses that have developed through those homebrew clubs, and that's really kind of where a lot of the craft breweries in this area have come from. But at this point, there are a lot of breweries, and there's a lot of opportunity to get a job in a brewery and get to know the business. And I think that will make you a much better both businessman and brewer.
For somebody who hasn't been here before and they come down and visit you guys, what would be something you'd want them to walk away with in terms of an experience with you? So
I feel like part of our business is just being part of this bigger community and being a positive member of that community. So I think I would want them to walk away with the experience of great beer, a very cool place where there's a great community of people. But also, we like to do some outreach. And so we do charity events here. We're always happy to have people can bring their dogs and kids in here and have birthday parties or things like that. We've had people do fundraisers for, bike rides for MS and that type of thing. So I think that if they came here, I'd want them not only to feel like, oh, that was a great, cool place. I really felt comfortable there, had good beer, and the community is aspect of it is really fun.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much to Craig for his time. It is a great location. That deck on the rooftop, fantastic. And the beers are excellent too. That coffee beer we talked a lot about in the episode, delicious. It had that cold brew coffee with a little bit of honey in it. Oh, it was delicious. Definitely recommend you check out RoofTop Brewing Company. Thanks to you supporting us on Patreon, because this is an independently produced podcast series. We can't do it without you. And for as little as $1 an episode, you can help support the production of this podcast. Head to patreon.com/Cascadian Beer. Don't forget to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Overcast, wherever you listen to podcasts, really. Make sure you're subscribed. And if you can, leave us a review on the platform you're listening to this podcast on. It really helps us get this episode and the others into as many ears as possible. If you want to follow us, keep up to date with what's going on, and I got a bit of extra content coming out now, you can do so on Facebook, facebook.com/Cascadian Beer. I'm on Twitter @Cascadian Beer, and I'm on Instagram @Cascadian Beer Podcast. And speaking of social media, I have to give a quick shout out to Monica, who reached out on Twitter and suggested this episode. So if you want to hear your favorite brewery on the podcast, feel free to reach out to me on any of our social media channels. Thank you so much again for listening. Hope you enjoyed this episode. Until next time, remember, support your local.